Good morning and welcome to the Sport for Business Daily. We are joined this morning by Moira Aston, the CEO of Canoeing Ireland, and Moira joined the organisation in December 2018. Yesterday, the publication of the annual report for 2019 showed some pretty remarkable figures. So you've obviously made an impact. You're very welcome to Sport for Business, Moira.
Thanks, Rob, and thank you for inviting me on. Delighted to get the chance to talk about canoeing.
It's a pleasure. 2019, it was some year. You saw a 28% increase in revenue from less than 600,000 to almost 760,000, a 25% increase in membership. Like, those are the kind of numbers that Michael O'Leary would be excited about in a business context, but they would be almost unheard of for a sport which is as rooted in tradition as canoeing. What was the secret sauce that you were able to bring to it?
I think timing is everything, Rob, and I was lucky to come in on foot of a very successful year that Paddy Boyd had as interim CEO, and he did a lot of the groundwork in terms of, so a lot of this was connections and pathways, to be honest with you. It was trying to re-establish the relevance of Canoeing Ireland as a governing body to its members, and really encourage, show people that we had something to offer, that we were there for them in a support capacity, in a development capacity. And people just started coming back on board again. A lot of those members that you see, the increase in membership might not be new members. Some of them certainly will be, but a lot of them are people who just returned to the sport during that year in 2019 with renewed hope that we were on the pathway to something special, which was great. And coupled with the membership, we again, and I can't ever thank Sport Ireland enough for the confidence that they've shown in us. We had some really great results in terms of grants during the year from Sport Ireland. So and the great thing about them was that they actually fully fitted in with our own strategic goals. So what they did was they facilitated where we would like to go anyway. So there was great synergy there. So there was an increase in core grant and performance grant, which was great. And then we got the Women in Sport grant of 80,000 over 2 years, which was huge to us, because I think it's very obvious from the annual report that we have a skewed kind of a membership profile. So it favours men and it favours older people as opposed to juniors and women. And we would really like to see that female membership increase, and we want to see get more juniors on board. And that the Bridge the Gap funding certainly assisted with that. It was incredible when we started that programme, and we actually recruited 33 female ambassadors at the start, and that grew exponentially across such a variety of disciplines and categories and areas of the sport, from grassroots right through to leadership. And we underpinned it with, we partnered up with Leadership Journeys, and that program was led by Linda Byron, and it was tailored to their individual needs. So each ambassador had their own specific needs in terms of growing their leadership potential, addressed by Leadership Journeys, and it was very bespoke, and it was hugely beneficial to them and to us. And 2020 would have been the year when we really would have seen the fruits of what was coming out of Bridge the Gap. We've seen a lot of it during the year this year, even under lockdown conditions, but there's potential there that's just untapped yet. So it's great. It really is great to have it.
Sounds brilliant, and you can only build the highest buildings on the deepest foundations. So well done on that. You ended the year with reserves of €116,000, but COVID has obviously had a huge impact across all sports. How has it been felt within canoeing?
It has been, and again, I can't say often enough how lucky we've been just in some regards. We are lucky, although as a business model, it's not optimum. A lot of our funding comes through grant funding, and because grant funding was maintained during the year in 2020, we didn't experience the same drop in income that some of the other sports who are self-sufficient in terms of funding would have experienced. So there was a stability there, and there was a level of comfort that that funding was going to be in place to the end of the year in 2020, which was great. And also, one of the biggest expenditures we have is our salaries, our wage bill for the year. And the support that came through the EWSS and TWSS has been absolutely fantastic for us, and we've managed not to let anyone go. There's been no salary cuts, so, we have managed to really kind of underpin a lot of the activity that we've been doing breakneck speed with policies and procedures and underlying programs, that it's been great for us. This year has been, although it won't be seen generally in terms of numbers, it has been a good year and we've survived it well.
Okay, and then into 2021, again, you'll be looking at, keeping up that momentum. It's like any sport, there's a gap between, or a difference between participation on one side and the high performance on the other. With regards to the high performance, you've got two paddlers already qualified for both the Olympic Games in Liam Jigu and in the Paralympic Games with Pat O'Leary. The sort of the number of people that tune into sport, and particularly the smaller sports, or the challenger sports, as I prefer to call you, come with the Olympics, is huge. It's that moment in the sunshine. Do you hope that you might end up getting a couple of more, somebody like Jenny Egan, who might get qualified for a place out there as well? And how important is it that the 2020 Olympics takes place for the first time in 2021 alongside Paralympics, and that Ireland has got a strong representation on Team Ireland?
I think you could not overstate the importance of having a presence at the Olympic Games. You really couldn't. It is such a showcase for sport in all its forms. And if you ask people who they know, people who aren't involved in the sport, what names they recognise, everyone knows Owen Reinish because he was at the Olympics. So it's hugely important to us that not only do we have representation, but that we optimize as much as possible. We create opportunities for other people to actually find their space at the Olympic Games. And there's a couple of other athletes who potentially could make it there. We're limited in terms of numbers of who can actually, how many people we can send in various categories. But certainly Jenny Egan is still chasing a place. Hannah Craig in slalom is looking for a place. There is a couple of K1 slalom athletes who would be there or thereabouts, would be very close to potentially getting there. And so fingers crossed, it's been such an unusual year this year in terms of competition. And while some competitions have opened a little bit and we have some athletes who are getting out there to try and test where they are in relation to the overall landscape of performance athletes in the sport, it's kind of difficult because not all countries are turning up for all competitions. And so while we've had some great results so far this year, particularly in the last few weeks in World Cups and in European Championships, and we have another Junior European Championships coming up next weekend. And so there's certainly potential for more people to get there. We are delighted to have and do such great ambassadors like Liam, although he's living in France, is from Clare and has a fantastic background. He'll talk about his GAA background and God knows what, but he can switch to French as fast as and he's in the best place for training. We don't have those facilities in Ireland for performance paddlers in slalom, and we're hoping that the Georgia Stock course goes ahead, and we're hoping that we have that level of facility in Ireland for slalom paddlers. And certainly in sprint, Jenny, as you mentioned, certainly is chasing a place, and Paralympics, Patrick O'Leary, we're just delighted to be represented at both Olympic Games and Paralympic Games.
That facility at George's Dock, it would be a magnificent addition. Obviously, the Liffey descent, the River Liffey, it's on the banks of, albeit right in the heart of the city. Would it be outside the bounds of possibility to assume that could really take on a position as one of Europe's leading facilities for, there's very few that would be as close to a city centre?
That's very true. And we have, the fantastic thing about the Georgia Stock development is that because we were invited to be involved at the start in terms of the consultative, the consultation process, we brought the chair of the slalom committee for the International Canoe Federation over, Jean-Michel Prono, and he had a look at the course to make sure that it was of a standard to host an international competition, which it is. It's designed by Andy Laird, who designed the Lee Valley course, the Olympic course over in England, and it fingers crossed. I keep, the Dublin City Council and Owen Keegan are very confident that they can get this across the line in terms of facility. And we obviously have our own motivation for wanting it to happen. And I understand that there are other problems in the world at the moment, but the funding that's been looked at for this isn't funding that may be used elsewhere. It can't be diverted to housing, or it is for this facility. And so we'd fully back it and hope that it could happen. You know, our slalom paddlers have been traveling all over the world to facilities to train. Great expense to them, you know, and it would be just apart, obviously, from the emotional high you would get from hosting a competition at home when we have such a fantastic team of paddlers here. Also very useful for our freestyle paddlers, which is, you know, it's an event that's really taken off in Ireland, and there's although it's not an Olympic discipline, it has massive potential for actually maybe being included in the Olympics at some stage in the future. But a huge following and really progressive work being done within the freestyle group of athletes. So it would be great for us.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. It is always good to and beneficial to reward those who've done a good job, and Canoeing Ireland is obviously done that. One final thing before we go. Over the last 7 years, we have produced an annual list of 50 women of influence within Irish sport. And I'm delighted this morning to let you know, Moira, that you are the first name to appear on the 2020 list, which we will be publishing out over the next couple of months. One of our few CEOs within Irish sport that is a woman. How important do you think it is that when we talk about gender balance, that we actually do promote internally and promote from within, so that we show it at the very top levels of our sporting administration?
I think it's hugely important. I think that there's a dual kind of a responsibility here, and one is that women need to put their names forward for these roles, and the second one is that they have to be considered in a serious light, and they have to be given the supports that's needed to actually maybe make that step into that. I mean, I find that the female CEO grouping within sports is hugely supportive of each other, but very much integrated. It's not like a separate group, you know, it's very much part of that CEO grouping within sport. There's some fantastic women in there, really great women, very supportive of each other. And I just as an aside to that, as I was developing through my journey, you know, in sport administration, I think that the people who would have mentored me best were probably men during that process. There wasn't very many women in senior roles at that point in time, because we're going back about 10 or 15 years. I had some really, really supportive men who got me through, really pushed me, you know, you need to go for this and you need to go for that. And sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not, and sometimes you have to just take it on the chin if you're not the best person for the role. But if you're not putting yourself forward, if you're not putting yourself into that space, well then, you know, the responsibility is on you to actually figure out what you can do about that. Thanks, I'm delighted to be on the list, Rob.
Well, it is a pleasure to bring you that breaking news. You will be in company with a very impressive group of 50 that we will be naming out over the next couple of months. But for the moment, anyway, congratulations on what you've achieved within the sport of canoeing and on the numbers that you've published now as a result of this. So, Moira Aston from Canoeing Ireland, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure. Thank you.